China's Orbital Compute, a new era in AI. China has launched 12 satellites, which experts describe as the world's first operational space-based computing network, applying edge computing principles to orbital operations in a development that could reshape how enterprises manage global data. China's Orbital AI constellation is more than a technological feat. It's a proof of concept for distributed processing, autonomy at the edge, and context-driven compute as core tenets of modern architecture, said Sanchit Gogia, Chief Analyst and CEO at Greyhound Research. What makes this constellation distinctive is not just its scale, but its shift in control logic. Inference and orchestration happen in orbit across a high-speed inter-satellite mesh, without needing constant cloud fallback. We are now entering a post-centralization era, where compute is pulled toward the edge not by ideology, but by necessity, noted Gogia. Whether it's orbital satellites, smart grids, or in-field robotics, AI workloads are becoming heavier, more inference-driven, and intolerant to network-induced drag. Centralized clouds won't disappear, but for many classes of applications, they will no longer be the first stop. The economics of enterprise compute are undergoing a structural inversion, and China's Three-Body Computing Constellation makes that undeniable, observed Gogia. As AI workloads are increasingly executed at the point of collection, in orbit or on Earth, the cost of centralization becomes a liability. This development presents not just an engineering milestone, but a geopolitical one, casting data governance into uncharted territory, warned Gogia. Orbital compute is redefining the boundaries of data sovereignty. The three-body system decentralizes not only AI processing, but also geopolitical accountability, placing inference and decision-making infrastructure into orbits that may not fall cleanly under existing legal regimes. As quoted in computerworld.com, in an article authored by Gyana Swain, published on May 20th, 2025, beyond the media quote, our view in full. Press for time? You can focus solely on the Greyhound flashpoints that follow. Each one distills the full analysis into a sharp, executive-ready takeaway, combining our official standpoint, validated through pulse data from ongoing CXO trackers, and grounded in field notes from real-world advisory engagements. Orbital edge architectures will force enterprise blueprints back to the drawing board. Greyhound Flashpoint, China's Three-Body Computing Constellation, a 12-satellite deployment that marks the world's first operational space-based AI computing network, offers the clearest real-world validation yet of the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises. Each satellite acts as a self-sufficient compute node, executing AI workloads in orbit with minimal ground dependence. As per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 68% of CIOs globally are accelerating edge-first investments to escape the constraints of centralized cloud architectures, mirroring the very shift now being trialed in space. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, China's Orbital AI constellation is more than a technological feat. It's a proof of concept for the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, which champions distributed processing, autonomy at the edge, and context-driven compute as core tenets of modern architecture. What makes this constellation distinctive is not just its scale, but its shift in control logic. Inference and orchestration happen in orbit across a high-speed inter-satellite mesh, without needing constant cloud fallback. For terrestrial enterprises, this challenges the very logic of centralized design. In sectors like logistics, defense, manufacturing, and energy, this model presents an operational advantage that is no longer theoretical, it's competitive. Greyhound Pulse. In Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 74% of enterprise technology leaders across Asia-Pacific, Europe, and North America flagged edge, computing, and workload autonomy as top priorities in their next architecture refresh. Rising cloud egress costs, AI model sprawl, and growing concerns over network dependency are accelerating moves to shift intelligence closer to the data source. Moreover, 61% of respondents from manufacturing and critical infrastructure sectors said that their current architectures cannot meet real-time operational demands, further reinforcing the call for distributed execution. Greyhound Field Note. Per a recent Greyhound Field Note with a smart port operator, centralized cloud processing became a single point of failure during a regional connectivity outage, bringing down critical automation for nearly 6 hours. After re-architecting its infrastructure using distributed AI nodes deployed at each terminal, the port now runs 83% of its inference locally. This redesign not only restored operational continuity, but also delivered sub-second response times, key to managing high-volume container flows. The shift mirrors what's now happening in orbit. Compute nodes empowered to decide, act, and recover without central oversight. Orbital compute raises the stakes on sovereignty and strategic control. Greyhound Flashpoint. The launch of China's Three-Body Computing Constellation presents not just an engineering milestone, but a geopolitical one, casting data governance into uncharted territory. This orbital computing mesh exemplifies the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises, which anticipates not just technical decentralization, but jurisdictional complexity. As compute breaks free from terrestrial borders, Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 finds that 62% of multinational CIOs are actively reviewing sovereignty clauses and legal control in data contracts, especially across cross-border operations and hybrid cloud architectures. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, orbital compute is redefining the boundaries of data sovereignty. The three-body system decentralizes not only AI processing, but also geopolitical accountability, placing inference and decision-making infrastructure into orbits that may not fall cleanly under existing legal regimes. This raises hard questions for enterprises operating in regulated industries, where data lineage, jurisdictional control, and compliance are non-negotiable. The Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises, urges organizations to move beyond physical location as a proxy for control. Instead, they must assess compute architecture through the lens of governance zones, legal interoperability, and sovereign infrastructure resilience across land, sea, cloud, and now space. Greyhound Pulse. In Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 58% of global CIOs said that location-aware governance is now a key requirement when evaluating AI infrastructure partners. This number rises to 71% among respondents in regulated sectors such as banking, pharmaceuticals, and critical infrastructure. Nearly half confirmed that data residency strategies are being extended to include compute control, not just storage location, reflecting a deeper awareness that compliance risk now resides in the execution layer, not merely the data lake. Greyhound Field Note. In a recent Greyhound Field Note, with a financial services provider operating across Southeast Asia and the EU, a dispute over data access between local regulators and a global hyperscaler forced the company to temporarily halt a key analytics workload. The core issue wasn't data location. It was where inference occurred and under whose laws that execution was deemed valid. The incident has since triggered a re-architecture towards sovereign-aligned processing nodes and a re-evaluation of all non-transparent orchestration layers. As orbital compute scales, such scenarios are no longer hypothetical. They're strategic flashpoints in enterprise architecture. The economic center of gravity is shifting to the edge. Greyhound Flashpoint. The economics of enterprise compute are undergoing a structural inversion, and China's Three-Body Computing Constellation makes that undeniable. As AI workloads are increasingly executed at the point of collection, in orbit or on Earth, the cost of centralization becomes a liability. This shift aligns directly with the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises guiding enterprise leaders toward performance and resilience-driven architecture. According to Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 66% of CIOs report that the cost of backhauling data to centralized cloud environments now outweighs the benefit for specific workloads, especially in low-latency and high-bandwidth scenarios. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, we are now entering a post-centralization era, where compute is pulled toward the edge not by ideology, but by necessity. Whether it's orbital satellites, smart grids, or in-field robotics, the common thread is this. AI workloads are becoming heavier, more inference-driven, and intolerant to network-induced drag. Under the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises, enterprises must evaluate when and where to execute workloads, not just based on infrastructure availability, but based on data gravity, latency tolerance, economic viability, and regulatory exposure. Centralized clouds won't disappear, but for many classes of applications, especially those tied to physical operations, they will no longer be the first stop. Greyhound Pulse. In Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 7 in 10 enterprise CIOs confirmed they are modeling cost-performance trade-offs between central cloud processing and edge local execution. Among those already deploying AI in operations, such as in logistics, healthcare, and smart infrastructure, 64% said they have formally classified application tiers based on latency thresholds, model complexity, and egress cost, enabling them to selectively prioritize distributed execution. Greyhound Field Note. Per a recent Greyhound Field Note with a global medical device manufacturer, centralized AI training and inference introduced critical latency in diagnostic workflows, impacting patient throughput in mobile clinics across Latin America. After transitioning to edge-native compute modules integrated into the diagnostic units themselves, the organization saw a 52% reduction in response times and a 37% drop in data transport costs. More tellingly, the cost to run AI at the edge was recouped within 11 months, proving that distributed processing is not only technically viable, but economically compelling. The vendor landscape must stretch to orbit and beyond. Greyhound Flashpoint. China's Three-Body Computing Constellation is not just a technological milestone. It's a strategic cue that enterprise computing is evolving faster than many vendors are ready for. With Orbital infrastructure now executing AI workloads independently, the demands on software, silicon, and orchestration partners are changing. This evolution aligns squarely with the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises for enabling compute across diverse, dynamic environments. In Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 71% of CIOs said they are actively reviewing their partner stack to support more resilient, distributed execution models, highlighting a growing mismatch between current vendor offerings and emerging operational realities. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the compute layer is fragmenting, and the vendor ecosystem must follow suit. The new frontier isn't multi-cloud. It's multi-node, multi-context, and mission-critical. Under the Greyhound Distributed Enterprise Blueprint, a strategic framework developed by Greyhound Research for future-ready enterprises, this means enterprises will need orchestration platforms that can span from on-prem to edge to orbital mesh, and silicon partners that support real-time inference in constrained environments. Traditional cloud-native vendors focused solely on hyperscaler integration will find themselves strategically boxed in. Enterprises must begin building partnerships with providers who can support compute portability, telemetry transparency, and policy-aligned automation in locations where cloud may not reach or is no longer trusted. Greyhound Pulse. In Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 63% of technology leaders confirmed that they are now applying different partner evaluation frameworks for edge and AI infrastructure. Legacy vendors that do not provide robust, independently governed edge offerings are being deprioritized in RFPs, particularly in sectors like energy, industrial manufacturing, and national infrastructure. The Pulse also revealed growing demand for sovereign-aligned partners that can operate under varied compliance frameworks across geopolitical boundaries. Greyhound Field Note. A recent Greyhound Field Note with a European public transport operator revealed friction with a longtime hyperscaler partner when deploying AI-based incident detection at unmanned transit hubs. The hyperscaler lacked viable local inference support and could not meet evolving regional compliance standards for real-time processing. The enterprise ultimately shifted to a dual-stack architecture, combining edge-native orchestration from a smaller EU-based vendor with sovereign data controls. The result? Improved SLA compliance and regained regulatory trust. This experience reflects a growing reality. Enterprises can no longer afford to outsource resilience, portability, or policy alignment. The vendor stack must evolve in step with the architecture. Analyst in focus. Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CXOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media. including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thofker.com.